Come on guys, let's learn AWS Lambda today. So what is Lambda? Lambda is a compute service provided by the AWS. For compute, we already have EC2, right? Then what is the need of Lambda? The main feature of Lambda is serverless. So Lambda is serverless. Here serverless doesn't mean Lambda don't have any servers. It means you don't have to manage any of the servers. We use Lambda mainly for cost optimization. It means Lambda saves a lot of money. So how it will save? For example, you need a compute resource to run a simple code like adding two numbers or multiplying two numbers. These small tasks will take max 5 to 10 seconds. And if you use Lambda for these kind of tasks, you will be charged only for those 5 to 10 seconds. Means you will be charged only when the job is running. You can't do this with EC2. Generally, you use Lambda for running a specific function or specific task, not whole application. For example, consider an e-commerce application. You can use Lambda for only for payment function. As the payment is started, Lambda function will start. When the payment is completed, Lambda will stop. And you will be charged only for those 5 to 10 seconds where your payment function is running. So with Lambda, auto scaling will happen automatically. So Lambda will decide how much resource it needs to run the task. So it will add that much of resources like memory, CPU and other resources. Lambda is kind of a serverless environment. Means you can't log into the backend server. If you're using EC2, then you can do SSH login. But you can't do this with Lambda. Also, you can use Lambda function for automating the routine task. For example, you have a job that creates a report and send that to the higher management every day at 8 p.m. These kind of use cases you can automate with Lambda. For Lambda, you can add a cron schedule. Then every day at 8 p.m. it will run. Maybe it might take 5 minutes to run that particular job. Then the function will stop and you will be charged for only those 5 minutes. You can't maintain a EC2 instance for this kind of 5 minutes job, right? So Lambda will be very helpful for automating these kind of routine tasks. So these are the main features of AWS Lambda. Let's check out Lambda in demo now. In AWS console, you can search for Lambda here. Then you can click on Lambda. For Lambda, you have to create a Lambda function first. So you can click on create a function. Here we have 3 options. You can create a function from the scratch or you can use a blueprint. Blueprint is nothing but a template. Here we will get the general use cases like get S3 object or create a mobile backend, create a microservices. These kind of use cases you can get templates here. Or you can use a container image. You can create a container image in your local, then you can push that into your container registry. You can use that as a Lambda function. So you have 3 options here. Now I'll choose author from scratch. Then I can give a function name. Function name can be anything. Then you have to choose the runtime. You have to choose one of these languages like .NET, Java, Node.js, Python or Ruby. So only these languages are compatible with Lambda. You can't use Lambda for example, running a shell script. So you have to choose any one of these only. So I will choose Python now. Architecture can be default. Then the execution role is nothing but a IAM role. If you have an existing IAM role, then you can use that. Or you can create a new role. And this new role will have a basic Lambda permissions. Then you can click on additional configurations. Here we have a lot of options. Let me enable function URL. If you enable function URL, then you will get a HTTPS URL so that you can access this Lambda function from outside also. Then auth type I will choose as none. This is the test function. That's why I selected it as none. Then click on create function. It created a function now. So this is my Lambda function. You can add trigger or destination for this. Both trigger and destination is optional. In most of the use cases, you will use a trigger. Trigger can be time-based or event-based. Like you can add a cron job for this, or you can add an event for this. Event can be something like you want to run this Lambda function whenever a new object is uploaded to a particular S3 bucket. So that event is a trigger. So like this, you can add a event trigger or time-based trigger. Now it gave a sample Python code. I can modify this code also. Instead of hello from Lambda, I modified hello from tech code. Then I can test this code. I can click on test. Then I have to create a test event. I give an event name, then click on test. So it ran now. And if I click on details here, I get the details of that particular function. So output will be status code is 200 and the body is hello from Lambda. I modified the code, but I have not saved that changes. That's why it ran the previous code on. Also, you will get the init duration here. That is the time Lambda took for starting the function. Then you will get the build duration here. That is 2 milliseconds. So it will be build for those 2 milliseconds only. And the memory used, the maximum memory that is used, that is 30 MB. So Lambda will be automatically scale this memory or CPU based on our code. Also, you can access this function from this function URL. You can see here you got the output like hello from Lambda. Generally, we don't use this function URL, but option is there. And whenever you make some changes, you have to click on deploy here. Now the change is saved. Now if I click on test, now you can see the output here. That is hello from tech world. And Lambda function will always look for this Lambda underscore handler function. It will run that function only. it is like a main function in your Python code. So this function name can be changed, but by default it will be lambda underscore handler. Here you can see handler is lambda function dot lambda underscore handler. We'll look for lambda underscore handler function only. If you provide a different name here, then you have to modify the same thing here also. Also, these logs will be saved in CloudWatch. If you click on monitor here, you can click on view CloudWatch logs here. Here in CloudWatch, you can see there's a separate log group is created for this particular lambda function. That is my function. And also in log streams, you can see 2 log streams. So for each run, it will create a new log stream. And you can open this also. Here you can see the logs for that particular run. So to create log group and log streams, the lambda IAM role should have the permission. If you check IAM here, and if you check the roles, there will be a new role created with the function name. Like you can see my function hyphen role and with random character. If I click on this particular role, you can check the permissions for this particular role here. It allows only CloudWatch logs and 3 actions are allowed. That is create log group, create log stream and put log event. So new role will be created with basic Lambda permissions. And in Lambda page, if I click on configuration, here I can configure my Lambda function. You have the option to give a description, memory, the storage. The important thing is timeout. By default, it will be 3 seconds. Generally, your job will take more time. So 3 seconds is not sufficient. So you have to edit this. You can click on edit. Here I can increase the timeout. So I can increase up to 15 minutes here. If I give more than 15 minutes, for example, 16 minutes, it will give the error like the maximum timeout is 15 minutes. So for example, your job takes 30 minutes to run, then you can't use Lambda function for that particular use case. The maximum timeout is 15 minutes. Then execution role I can change if I want to change. Like for example, I have an existing role, then I can use that role only. Then click on save. So like this, you can change the general configuration. Similarly, you have the option to add trigger. If I click on add trigger here, I can add trigger from all these particular AWS services like CloudFront, API Gateway, S3, CloudWatch events, SNS, SQS. So you can add these kind of event triggers. Similarly, permissions. So this is the permission like for creating a log group or log stream and put events that we have. So this in IAM permissions. Same thing you can modify here. And if you want to add a destination, you can add that also here. Destination type, everything you have to choose here. So I'll not create a destination now. And also you can add a function here, or if you want to modify that, you can do that here. Like authentication type and anything if you want to modify, you can do that here. Similarly, you can add an environment variable. Environment variable, you have to have a key and value here. If you click on add environment variable, you can see key and value. If you want to use a variable in your code and you don't want to modify the value of that variable every time inside the code, then you can add that particular variable in environment variable of a Lambda function. So that if the value changed, then you can modify the value here, not in your source code. That's how you can use an environment variable for Lambda functions. Then there are a lot of other options like adding the tags. Like any other services, you can add a tags for your Lambda function also. Then you can create a Lambda function inside your VPC also. Here you can click on edit, then you can select your VPC and the subnet, security groups and everything. Make sure that your subnet have sufficient IP addresses because each Lambda function will associate with the IP address. For example, if you have a subnet, it has only 16 available addresses and you have some 20 Lambda functions in this particular subnet. Then you can't run all these 20 Lambda functions at once because each Lambda function will be associated with one IP address. So these are the main configuration you can do with the AWS Lambda. Here I have only one code file. And if you want to create a new file like requirement.txt or any other file, then you can click on new file here. And if you don't want to write code here, you want to write code in your IDE, then that's fine. In most of the cases, developers write code in their IDs, not here. And if you write your source code in your local, and if you want to upload that source code into Lambda function, then you can click on upload from here. Here you have 2 options. First option will be, you can create a zip file in your local. Then you can upload that .zip file from local to here. And the second option will be, you can upload the source code to S3 bucket. Then Lambda will fetch from that particular AWS S3 bucket. So these are the options available with the Lambda functions. There are other options also like layers and other things. I just want to cover the basics of Lambda today. So that's it for today. Subscribe and check out other videos too.